Staghorn ferns are just fantastic. They are one of the most unique structural plants that we can have in our landscape. Today I want to share with you some of my growing experience growing staghorns outside. A little anatomy, a little basics, some growing tips and hints. What to feed it, some basics on mounting, the basics on propagating. The more we can learn about the staghorn and more we can share about the staghorn, the better we'll all be at growing staghorns. Hey, it's Elise. I'm glad you came by the gardens today. I'm in Zone 9B. I grow all my staghorns outside. I really don't have any experience growing them inside, but staghorns are a very, very popular houseplant. All the information I'm sharing with you today is about how to grow them on the outside. This is Propagating bifurcatum. It's one of the more common staghorns. It's still beautiful. And it's probably one of the easier to grow staghorns. So this is one of the first plants that folks will venture into growing when they're first new to staghorns. The name Propagating bifurcatum, in Greek, platus means flat. And I always think about the platypus with its flat bill. So it's a flat frond. And cirrus means horn. Again, a flat horn in reference to the staghorn's fronds. Bifurcatum is split or forked. Again, referring to the fronds. 18 varieties, many hybrids. And of course now they're grown all over the world. But most are native to Indonesia, South Africa, South Asia, Australia. There is one plant that is native to either Central or South America. But again, they're grown all over the world as houseplants. If you live in a planting zone where you can support a staghorn growing it outside, they're fantastic. They can get huge. I know the ones grown on the inside are really pretty, but they can't compare with these huge staghorns in natural environments. If you get a chance, go online and look at some of the photos. See if you can find photos of the staghorns in the wild themselves. Really nice. Staghorns are now naturalized in Florida and they are naturalized in Hawaii. Actually, in Hawaii, some of them are considered invasive. All right, staghorns, they are true ferns. A true fern does not set a seed, a flower, a berry, a fruit of any kind. A true fern propagates through some type of vegetative division, like cutting one of the small plants off, or root division, and by spores. So again, a true fern does not set flowers, seeds, berries, or fruit. You will often see plants that have the name fern in them. And that is just a characteristic of the plant that may be similar to true ferns. Staghorn ferns are epiphytes. They're air plants. They can take all their nourishment, all their moisture from the air. And in their natural habitats, that's what they do. They grow in trees, they grow on rocks, they grow on the sides of mountains. So, true epiphyte air plant. Now you will see young baby staghorns in soil or some type of potting medium. And then lots of times they put the young ones in the pots just for stability to make them a little more aesthetically pleasing, especially if they're going to sell them. And adding a moist medium helps to keep that small root system of the baby staghorn moist. Then as they get older, they can move out and be on their own. In the wild, of course, they are true epiphytes. All right, let's look at the anatomy a little bit. Since staghorns have a very unique anatomy, it really helps to study the anatomy just a little bit. It's going to help grow the plant better. It will help if you decide you want to cut a plant out, and it will help if you want to mount it. This is a nice size staghorn. This is my mother staghorn. We do call her Mother Stag. I have had her for about 9 years. When I first got the plant, it was about 1 foot long. I threw it in a basket. I hung the basket up under this same tree. I ignored it. It grew. Eventually, I put it up on a 2x4. And you can see the original basket. Now, one nice thing about staghorns, after they grow for a while, they will completely wrap around the mounting, whatever you use to mount them in. Now, if this staghorn gets too big, and it's getting quite large, for the 2x4 to hold it, we'll have to go to Plan C, which will probably mean putting some ropes or chains up on the crepe myrtle's branches. When I was young, my mother had one. I mean, it was huge. It was 6-7 feet tall. Huge staghorn. This variety, the Propagating bifurcatum, she had it hanging on tractor chains. And one day I came in, it was gone. And I said, well, where is it? Well, one of my cousins had come over and talked her into giving them the staghorn. They had a pickup truck. My mother said it filled the whole back of the pickup truck. I have never forgiven my cousin for that. So they do get quite large, then they can get very, very heavy. We're talking hundreds of pounds heavy. Now, staghorns are sold all over the world now, and they can get quite pricey. Small ones from some of the more available varieties could be $10-20, and I have seen them listed online for almost $2,000. 18 varieties, many hybrids. Beautiful. All right, back to the anatomy. Look at how big this one is. It's huge. About 5 foot by 5 foot. All right. All varieties, no matter which variety you have, are made up of the same 2 basic parts. They're made up of fronds, F-R-O-N-D-S, and fronds are the equivalent of leaves, and some folks do call the fronds leaves, which I do sometimes also, but they are fronds. The big green frond here is called a base, a basal, a shield, an elephant frond, many other names. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Its job is to protect the young emerging plants, to protect the little rhizome in here, the little root system, the young little plants coming out. There's a little bud there. That's their job. Another job is to collect water and nutrients in their little pockets. It is completely natural and normal for these shield fronds to turn brown, to turn cinnamon color. They are supposed to do that. Do not try to remove it. Now, we think of this staghorn as one great big plant, but it's not. It's a mass, and that mass is made up of layer after layer, year after year, of the dried shield fronds. The more shield fronds you have, the larger your mass. Okay, so don't remove your shield fronds. Now, if you see a little fuzz on the shield fronds and your other fronds, don't remove it. That's good for the plant. That helps with transpiration, and it helps with wind control, moisture control. So the shield fronds are extremely important. Now, some of the stags, when they get a little older, they'll make a basket or a nest at the top, which actually catches more water and more nutrition. Since it is an epiphyte, it can get all of its nutrition from surrounding trees, leaf litter, other debris. All right, the second frond. these beautiful, stiff, leathery fronds. These are foliar or sterile antler or elkhorn fronds, and other names depending upon your area. They are split, and that's where we get the name bifurcatum. They come out again from a little root, little rhizome in there. Now that rhizome will travel in this mass and make new plants. And I have a little about, I don't know, 30 or 40 second video at the end of this. So make sure you watch all the way through and see that. It's kind of interesting, talking about new baby staghorns. So we have this little root system, we have a little rhizome system, and it is protected by the shield frond. And all of these beautiful antler-shaped fronds jut out. Again, all varieties have the two basic fronds, but the characteristics might be a little different. How they're shaped, how they lay. This, again, Platycerium bifurcatum. All right, these are called fertile or sterile fronds. Now, this is a sterile frond. There's no spores on it. These are fertile fronds. They're just full of spores. This is not a disease. It is not an insect. Do not cut it off. Now, if you're interested in propagating or collecting spores, then you leave them on. These aren't quite ready. They need to thicken up a little bit more, and they'll almost get fuzzy. So that's our two basic fronds and some basic anatomy. It's very important that you know about those two fronds when you want to start removing plants and mounting them. Now, some plants are what they call solitary. They don't produce pups or young plants. The only way you can propagate that type of plant is through spores. And spores takes a little practice. All right, basics, folks. This is a good plant for the wildlife, the little creatures like lizards and frogs. I've even seen snakes in here. The top will hold moisture, which helps to feed the insects. And talking about feeding, there's some debate on the internet about what you should feed, if you should feed staghorns. Now, of course, if you're growing them on the inside, that is a completely different thing. Outside, if you're growing your staghorn in a location where it's happy, that emulates its natural wild habitat, you probably don't have to do much at all. But if you're in a location that may not be its true habitat, then you're going to have to help the fern out. The University of Florida's Agriculture Division said young ferns, especially this variety, should be fed once a month with a light dilution of fertilizer during the growing season in the summer months. In the wintertime, you back off on the food and the water. So, I do give this fern auxiliary water. We are in semi-drought right now. If I didn't give it auxiliary water, it's going to start browning off, yellowing off, and I'm going to lose lots of these fronds. If it gets dry enough for a long enough time, your young ferns can die. So the thing to do, everybody has to make this their own call. Look at your variety of staghorn. Are you growing it on the inside, or are you growing it on the outside? If you're growing it on the outside, what is your planting zone? Are you moist? Are you humid? Do you get lots of rain? Is it under a tree where it's going to get lots of leaf droppings? All those things come into play. And then you can adjust your feeding habit to that. Banana peels are those old-timers. Throw the banana peel on the staghorn fern method of feeding. I've always fed this one with banana peels. And you're going to get some folks saying, oh, well, that really doesn't work, don't bother. Well, I think it does work. And basically the banana peels are about the only thing I use. Once in a great while I'll come out and give it a little DIY diluted liquid fertilizer. Okay, so if you want to feed it more, of just a few ideas of what to feed your staghorn fern: diluted Epsom salts, diluted fish emulsion, diluted urea, diluted teas, diluted any vegetative tea that you make, any green tea that you make. Just dilute it a little bit once a month in your growing season. Up to you, though. I know people who swear you should never, ever, ever feed them anything. Let them live on nothing but the leaf droppings. And in some locations, that does work. But if you want to help your plant out, if you want to help it grow bigger and more vigorous and be more beautiful, give it some fertilizer once in a while. So, again, water when you need it. If you're watering too much, you can tell your leaves will start yellowing off and then they'll brown off. Feed it whenever you wish. All right, maintenance. Very easy. Disease, insect resistant. It is completely natural, completely normal to get some die-off of the fronds. All plants have die-off of some type. So when you get these brown fronds, don't jerk on them. Don't try to yank them out. If you try to yank them out, you could risk damaging these little roots, those little rhizomes. So like here, where there's this great big cluster coming out from the same base, if one of these fronds were to start dying off, and I went in and just jerked and jerked and jerked, I could mess up that little rhizome. Take your clippers, clip it off, or just let nature take care of it. It will eventually brown off just like this. Now sometimes if you hold it up, it will come out. But don't force it. If it doesn't come out easy, just clip it off with your clippers or let it stay on. It will fall off by itself. It's about the only maintenance you have to do. So isn't that neat? So we've covered anatomy, we've covered how to feed it and when to feed it, we've covered some basic maintenance. They're quite easy to take care of, actually. If you put them in a place where they're happy, that's it. Propagation is through some type of vegetative removal. Cutting a little plant off. Now we think of this as a great big plant, but it's not. It's just dozens or hundreds of individual plants. And of course you can do spores. If you're going to cut a plant off, and I probably will be coming back not too distant of a future and cutting a couple of plants off, but it's really easy. So you just pick the plant you want and you come in and you take a knife and you cut it out. Just cut it out. Try not to get right on top of another plant so that you hurt that plant's rhizome. And I always try to take a little smaller ones off, and I try to take it off the back. Look at all those new shield fronds. Let me walk over to the other side, because I want to show you something. Look how big and pretty this back is. We actually cut this whole back off not long ago. I mean, the whole back. The whole half of the plant we cut off. And it was just brown material at that time. But see, it's grown out. Those little rhizomes just work their way through that mass and fill in again. So if I wanted to come in and cut a piece off, I might come in and take this young one here. Just take a knife and cut it off. And this one is really wrapped around the wire basket, so that probably wouldn't be a good choice. Maybe this one here on the bottom, or even this one. But just look around a little bit and see what you can find that might be kind of hid when you cut it off. And it's really easy to cut them off. You just have to be a little brave. All right, mounting is completely up to you. If you're growing them as a house plant, different considerations for your mounts. If you're growing them outside, let me share with you what I have found to be the easiest. Wire. Either in a basket form or a flat piece of wire, and I'll show you one in just a moment. The wire holds up outside for decades, and that gives the plant time to wrap completely around the mount and cover it up. And I like to use wire that has large holes in it. Now, it can be something as simple as a piece of garden wire that you've cut up, or you can find little decorator wire plaques and baskets and stuff like that at thrift stores, garage sales. They make fantastic little mountings. Now, if you've got some little baskets that you can just sit your plant in, that's all you have to do. Maybe put a little moss in for aesthetics. You don't even have to always tie it in. So, little wire baskets, flat pieces of wire are my mount of choice. Now, of course, you don't have to mount it at all when you're outside. I can cut a piece off, come over here to this tree, tuck it in to that crook there, and that's it. Now, I might have to tie it in for a little bit if it's small to give it time to get going. But one of the things that these basil fronds do is to help attach the new plant. Let me show you this. And this was just some little mountings that I was playing with, putting them on a log. Put them on with monofilament, and it's growing around. This one grew almost all the way around. Got new ones coming, new babies coming. Now, the only thing you really have to pay attention to when you're mounting them is to make sure your wire doesn't go across the top of your green part of your shield frond, because it could kill it. And see, you don't see any wire on top of this. The wire is actually slipped under the shield frond and then wraps around. Now, this one's been done for a while, so you can see where the wire has gone in. I just use monofilament, but you can use string, cord, small rope, anything you want. Crochet thread. Now, these were just hanging up underneath the tree, and then last year we had this surge of squirrels that would come and knock them down and knock them down. So they aren't doing quite as good as I had hoped that they would do. But here's another one. Isn't that pretty though? It's doing fantastic. The shield frond is wrapping around. The older ones have already adhered to the little piece of wood, and it's really neat. Let me show you this one. This one I'm going to have to remount. I put it on the frame that was a clock frame, great big wall clock. Beautiful frame underneath there, very heavy metal. And this is a quite large, heavy plant. In fact, it got so heavy that it pulled out. And you can see all the monofilament I have. I mean, I had enough monofilament on here, I thought, to hold an elephant on, but it didn't. So this one's going to have to be remounted. So let me show you some that are hanging up. Look at this one. They're pretty. Quite big. It's on a flat piece of wire. That's all. And it's doing fantastic. It will eventually grow and fill all this back in. And you can see all the layers of the dried shield fronds. Here's another really pretty one. Pull that down. Isn't that pretty? So they can be vertical, they can be horizontal. It's just how you want your fronds to jut out. Plus, I have noticed sometimes these little shield fronds, they always like to be kind of up. Sometimes they'll be sideways, but that's so they can catch moisture. And they can change a little bit. So if I were to permanently hang this one up like that, you can see these new little fronds are coming up to where their openings are at the top. Neat. And this one is growing through the wire, and pretty soon it will cover up this whole piece of wire. And look at all the new ones coming. And this is just a piece of wire. And you know, if you don't like the wire, you can always paint it to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing. Up to you. And what I have is just a couple of 2x4s out here under the big crepe myrtle. And this is kind of my nursery. And this is where I put the young ones that I cut off. This one is on a hibachi grill. And I had put some Spanish moss on just for aesthetics. Like I said, we've been extremely, extremely dry. But it's putting out new growth. Eventually it will cover up this whole grill. And you won't have to worry about seeing what you've mounted them on. Now my plan is to come back within the next week or so. Remount some of these, the ones that are struggling, the small ones. Maybe put a little more moss behind them to help with the humidity since we are so dry. And I'll give them a little food. Let's see about this baby. But even one this small is doing pretty good. But you can really see all the layers of the moss, of the shield fronds, forming the mass. Okay, nice. Let's go back to the mom. So that's it, folks. The Platycerium bifurcatum. Growing it outside. You basically want to emulate its natural habitat, which is indirect light, protection from the hot afternoon sun, humidity, moisture, some natural food. If you get a chance now, stay tuned for that little bitty video that's following this. And it's just a really good example of how the rhizomes travel in the mass. Then I'll try to come back and cut a couple more little plants off and do some mounting and remounting. Until we speak again, have a fantastic day. What a nice surprise, baby staghorn ferns. We had cut several pieces of the staghorn off with the idea to mount them. Got really busy, forgot about them. They were laying over in the shade, they were doing fine, but I came out and found all these baby staghorn ferns. I'm going to let them get just a little bit bigger, and then I'll gently take them off and put them in their own pots. Isn't nature great, folks? Happy gardening.